Hi, I'm Ron Pfeiffer, and this is Thursday, June 18th, 2015. I am interviewing Dr. Bob Rodnitzky, and we are at currently the 19th International Congress in San Diego. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Well, first of all, could you just tell us a little bit about your early years as well as education?
Early years, starting from my childhood. As I grew up in the city of Chicago, went to high school there, and had no idea that I'd be going into medicine throughout high school, at least anyways. And actually entered college as a physics major at the University of Chicago. We had a very difficult curriculum in physics, and I realized that physics probably wasn't for me when we had our first physics test for physics majors, and anyone who got something higher than a zero passed. Well, I got a zero. So I thought, well, maybe some other science might be a good idea. So I got interested in the biological sciences and then medicine. Got my bachelor's of science in biology at the University of Chicago. Went on to medical school at the same university. And should I go on to residency?
The next question on my magic list is, how did you get interested in neurology and neuroscience?
Well, as a medical student, one of probably my best, most interesting rotation was my neurology rotation. I had one of the very senior neurologists in the nation, well-known Richard Richter, who's, of course, no longer alive. Nicholas Vick, who sort of almost a contemporary, but 2 or 3 years older than me, was a resident at the time. And those people influenced me to go into neurology.
What about Parkinson's disease or movement disorders in particular?
Well, when I first started my career in academics, I actually had an interest in behavioral neurology. And my mentor was Dr. Arthur Benton, who was a giant in neuropsychology. Some would say the father of modern neuropsychology. But then Dr. Benton retired, and I was left adrift for a while. And I had an interest in Parkinson's disease, and there was nobody in our university, nobody in our state who had an interest in Parkinson's disease. So I became involved in some clinical trials. I really liked it. And then stayed in the field. And it didn't take a fellowship. There weren't many fellowships to have at that time. I did do a sabbatical in motor physiology at Stanford University, which was obviously movement disorder related.
And when did you move to Iowa?
I moved to Iowa immediately after medical school in 1966. Did an internship in internal medicine and then on to a neurology residency there.
Beyond the people you've already mentioned, are there any other role models or heroes in Parkinson's or movement disorders?
Well, I'm sure that I'm going to give an answer that 90% of the people who are interviewed give, and that would be Stanley Fahn, who was a giant in movement disorders even then, back in the 80s or so, when I became interested in movement disorders. So that would be and David Marsden, of course, as well. Those two. I can remember attending their unusual movement disorder video shows at the AAN, and that really would pump you up as a movement disorder person.
When did you? I know you were one of the earliest members of the Parkinson Study Group. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, the Parkinson Study Group actually antedated this organization. I think it was one of the key organizations in organizing movement disorder specialists into a cohesive group. And when I first joined the Parkinson Study Group, I was one of the first 24, 25 people to join. I know you were as well, Ron. They were about to embark on a very important clinical trial, which still stands today as one of the classical clinical trials in our specialty, the DataTop study. Forgot the question now, but that was a very, I think, a key moment in my career, and I think in movement disorders in this country as well.
I should add for the listeners that in the Parkinson Study Group, you are renowned as the Sniglet King.
And you're right up there with me, Ron. But
so what do you view as your greatest or most significant contribution to the field?
Well, you know, I'm not a basic scientist. I didn't discover any molecule or motor pathway, but my greatest contributions have been in clinical research and in teaching. So I'm proud that I've had a dozen or so clinical fellows, many of which have populated our state now with movement disorder specialists, because there weren't any when we started, and now we have several, and others have gone on to either clinical practice or academic positions around the country. And also in clinical research, proud to have been involved in the clinical trials for dozens of medications, perhaps most of the medications we use today for Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders.
And I will also add for the listeners that you also have been a Department of Neurology chairman at Iowa, and thus have had tremendous influence on others far beyond movement disorders that is not the topic of the interview today, but is certainly something should be known. Where do you think the field is headed?
Well, I think the field is headed toward recognizing new syndromes. You know, we were sort of a Parkinson's, Huntington's disease-based specialty in the very early days, and increasing number of movement disorders that can be recognized and tested for have developed, and now that's even accelerated with the advent of genetic testing and more basic understanding of the pathophysiology of movement disorders. So I think it's headed toward, sort of headed toward a lot of genetics and the increased understanding on the part of the practitioner of how genetics can be used to make diagnoses and to craft therapies.
What advice would you give the young people potentially interested in movement disorders?
Well, the same advice I gave to my children when they went to college. Work hard, play hard. No. I would say don't be deterred by the naysayers who continue to say, but they're increasingly wrong, that you're in a specialty for which there's only diagnosis but not treatment, because treatment, although it does lag behind diagnosis a bit, is also on a steep curve as well, and there are more things we can invoke for treatment now, and so be certain not to be deterred by what other specialties might say and have said in the past.
We looked at these questions beforehand, and this was the one you were a little reticent to have me ask, but because I'm a good soldier and have to do what we're supposed to do, here it comes. What do you do to achieve a good work-life balance?
Well, I think as I mentioned before this interview, I haven't always been able to do that. I've had a lot of responsibilities in my home department, in my home medical school, and you try not to give up any responsibilities in your specialty at the local and national level. So sometimes it's been hard, but as I've grown older, I've become more efficient in carrying out these responsibilities and been able to carve more time away from my family. My wife and children are very understanding, and when you do spend time with them, you want it to be really quality time.
Now, tell me a little bit, talking about spending time with your spouse. You also are not only famous as an author regarding Parkinson's disease, but there's a cooking angle to you.
Well, my wife writes cookbooks, and she's written 14 actually, with I'm proud to say over 250,000 copies sold. And many of these cookbooks have titles of the recipes that are puns. And I've never met a pun I didn't like. So that was my contribution. My wife does the hard work, reading the recipes, testing them, and I create the titles.
And I can tell you from experience, both the food and the puns and the titles are absolutely perfect. And if you don't have any of Donna's cookbooks, take it from me, go get them. Tell me a little bit about the role the Movement Disorder Society has played in your life.
Well, as I mentioned, similar to the Parkinson Study Group, the Movement Disorder Society has created a community of like-minded, similarly trained people across the country and across the nation, across the world, really. And it's really reinforces your interest in the specialty. It enhances education, and it's something to look forward to. The annual Congress, held in beautiful places, typically, like here in San Diego. So it's a really critical melting pot of people around the world with similar interests, and very, very important to our specialty.
If you could turn the clock back 20 years, or, gee, Bob, you're old, 40 years, would you do anything differently?
Well, we're talking about diapers now, right?
Nice try. Nice try.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't think I'd change a single thing, really.
Anything else that you would like to pass on to the viewers?
I'm a man of few words, despite what you might think from this interview. So I can't think of anything else that we haven't covered already in the interview.
I should have warned you ahead of time and had you end with a pun or a sniglet, but it's unfair to do that to you right now. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.